Nevada could reap hundreds of millions of dollars per year if it can wrest control of vast chunks of federal land. That's one conclusion in a recent task force report compiled for the legislature.
But what would this change mean for, say, hunters or hikers or others who have become accustomed to unfettered access to public lands? Nevada lawmakers are expected to ask Congress to relinquish control of more than 7 million federal acres, and that's just for starters. But is the task force report slanted? George Knapp of the I-Team here with that story.
Well, Nevada has tried this before, several times, in fact. Our state has demanded, requested, cajoled, and threatened the federal agencies, which manage more than 80% of the acres within Nevada's boundaries. Other western states have done likewise, but the heat has really been turned up in recent months. A closer look at the report of the Nevada Task Force shows it uses many of the same arguments and evidence that have been advanced all across the West, where one special interest has been pulling strings and pressing buttons.
This blue booklet is a blueprint for a public land revolution in Nevada, a report by the Land Management Task Force, created by the legislature to investigate the possibilities of a massive land transfer from the feds to the state.
Finally, we come to the elephant in the room, the BLM.
As the I-Team recently reported in a project about public lands, Nevada has the highest percentage of federal land in the country and has been griping about it since the 70s.
You want to tase me?
Anger bubbled to the surface last spring outside the Bundy Ranch in Bunkerville. The report argues that federal control has stifled economic development, that the state could do a better job of managing the lands. One projection is the state could reap more than $200 million per year if given control, starting with 7 million acres identified in the study, much of it along the Interstate 80 corridor, but also to include all BLM land that's been designated as solar energy zones and all acreage with geothermal potential.
You know, I think people who live and work in the state have a better idea of what resources are available and how they can best be managed.
The free market think tank NPRI has joined the chorus of voices asking for large-scale land transfers to the state. It echoes the claims made by the task force that there are all sorts of ways the state could make money from land not currently being developed, everything from mining, hiking, and hunting to movie production and pine nut picking. But there's little doubt what the big money maker could be.
There conceivably is a huge revenue potential, especially for exploration of shale rock in eastern Nevada. There are studies that show that we have huge potential oil reserves.
Oil and gas on public lands may be the driving factor behind the push in 7 western states for land transfers. Organizations behind the model legislation being pushed in Nevada and elsewhere are quietly funded by oil industry titans, including the Koch brothers. Those projections by the task force claiming Nevada could earn $200 million per year are based on what other western states earn from their lands. But for states such as Utah and New Mexico, more than 90% of the revenue is from oil and gas. Nevada may have greater oil potential out there, but actually produces only a tiny amount. It's one reason critics of the task force think the projections are bogus.
I think it's very optimistic.
Paul Aisley is now a former assemblyman whose committee authorized and oversaw the task force. He thinks there are legitimate reasons why some land should be transferred to state control. For instance, he says he sympathizes with ranchers who graze on public lands managed by multiple agencies. It's the voices of Nevada ranchers that have been loudest in calling for wholesale land transfers. Critics of the task force note that 16 of the 17 members were from rural or northern counties, many of them with ties to ranching. The representative from urban Las Vegas was County Commissioner Tom Collins, himself a rancher. Aisley says it's not a surprise the task force recommended what it did.
Is there any mystery about how that committee report, how it was going to go? I mean, is there any doubt that what their focus was going to be?
No. You see, that was missing from the whole process. I don't believe that we got input from the non-ranchers enough.
The task force report includes bullet point summaries of comments opposed to the land transfer, but they're included only in an appendix. Commissioner Tom Collins favors land transfers, but not on a huge scale. He thinks it makes sense to approach it a piece at a time, starting with federal lands in urban areas which local governments pay to lease.
We have over 30,000 acres of land that schoolhouses are on, that libraries are on, that easements and right-of-ways and flood control channels and streets and highways. and detention basins and you name it. A lot of federal land checkerboarded all over inside this valley.
The task force wants to transfer 7 million acres to the state, but elsewhere in the report, it tipped its hand by projecting how much Nevada could make if it took control of 45 million acres. Are the projections even in the same zip code as reality? Tonight at 6 o'clock, we'll look at some major factors that are glossed over by this proposal. Also, on our website, the I-Team's Steve Kaniger takes a closer look at how the task force arrived at some of its numbers. And we have a more comprehensive look at public lands issues on our Rebellion on the Range website. Just use the keyword rebellion.
All those numbers are important, though. You got to balance it out.
Yep.
All right.